Okay, we're a minute after. Welcome everyone, like I said, to our next edition of our Innovative Women in Leadership I Will virtual event series. Today we're going to be talking about empowering women in educational leadership with Dr. Cindy Wood. Before we get started, I want to encourage you to join the conversation outside of this virtual event. If you do, on any of your social media platforms, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, please use these hashtags, hashtag I Will Innovative Women in Leadership, or hashtag TEVE, our Thought Exchange virtual events. We like to call this must-see TEVE, and so please utilize those hashtags. Also, feel free to use the chat feature in the Zoom window. We want to know who you are, where you're joining us from, some of the things you're hoping to be able to learn from this virtual event series. So don't be afraid to do both of those things. Okay, now I want to introduce you to our speaker today. Dr. Cindy Woody is a nationally recognized educational leader who has worked her way up through the ranks as a teacher at every level. As a school principal, a central office executive director, an educational consultant, and now the coordinator of the University of Texas at Arlington's MED and Principal Preparation Program for the Educational Leadership and Policy Studies Department. Over the past 3 decades, Dr. Woody has emerged as a popular speaker and presenter at professional conferences because she is passionate about helping others discover their potential for taking their work to the next level. In her free time, she enjoys beekeeping, awesome, reading, cooking, and spending time with her family on their Central Texas ranch. I'm so excited to have Cindy joining us today, not just because she's doing such amazing things as an educational leader and preparing other educational leaders, but also because she's from Texas. So that is a win. Welcome, Cindy. We're so excited to have you here.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here too. This is a big day for us to be able to talk about women in leadership and removing like maybe some of the myth and just talking about what we can do instead of waiting for other people to tell us how they're going to fix things for us. I really like the idea of empowering women. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, that's great, Cindy. I'm super excited to jump into it. For the benefit of our attendees, what we're going to be discussing today, guys, these are our 3 big things. We're going to be talking about this study on superintendents that impacted Cindy in a big way. What happened? She's also just shared with us that she's read another one, so she's going to give us some insights into both of those studies. What it means to fake it till you make it and why it's important to do that. And then tips for how you can advocate for yourself in the workplace, similar to what Cindy just said, you know, not waiting around for society or big organizations to change. What can we do to make sure that we're gaining our power in our leadership space? So excited to have you here, Cindy. Really, our next part of this, the other thing I want to talk about is the format of the virtual event before we jump in. We're going to chat with Cindy for the first 20 minutes or so. Then we're going to invite you to join us in that conversation using Thoughtexchange for the last 20 minutes or so. And of course, after the event, like always, if you're interested in learning more about Thoughtexchange, Kumar, one of our sales representatives, will be awaiting you if you'd like to chat more about Thoughtexchange. So, Cindy, we got to know you a little bit professionally. Now I want to know you a little bit personally. So I'm going to ask you our 5-star questions for our 5-star leaders.
All right.
Are you ready? Okay.
I'm ready.
Beach or mountains?
Mountains. Yeah.
Oh, you'll have to come visit us up here in Roseland.
Oh, I would totally
love to have you. Okay, good. Yeah. Road trips or air travel?
Oh, road trips for sure. I
love it.
Yeah.
Okay, good. In-person meetings or virtual meetings?
I could go either way. I've gotten really accustomed to virtual. At first, I'm really like, I have the same kind of quality of conversation until it meant, you know, in Texas, everything is really super far apart and we just drive everywhere. You know, it's just part of being in Texas. We all have these big SUVs and we just drive everywhere. And so at some point you think that doesn't make any sense to drive to Houston when I'm in Dallas right now.
True.
So, you know, those virtual meetings, yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay. All right. Salty snacks or sweet tooth?
Sweet and salty.
Sweet and salty. I love this. You are very diplomatic, Cindy. You are like you're both on all of these. Okay. Twitter or Instagram?
I have different reasons for both. Okay, so for Instagram, it's all about the image, and so I love photos, and I love just the silence that goes along with a beautiful picture, and just how expressive it is. And Twitter, I think you definitely need a purpose for Twitter. You know, is there something you want to say, or, you know, it's all about the words. It's really like there are images, but it's really more about the words. And so
Right.
my thought in as few words as possible. So I definitely have a place in my heart for Twitter, but kind of lean towards Instagram.
Okay, you know what? I love you. I have been my most diplomatic guest who has touted the benefits of both choices in our 5-star questions. So I love that. We know a little bit about you professionally. We know a little bit about you personally now. So now that we're ready to go, we're going to jump into this interview. Talk to me a little bit about why empowering women leaders, especially in the educational space, is so important to you, but why you had a few concerns about that kind of being your passion and staking your claim to that cause.
Sure. Okay, so let me give you a little history. When I first decided to go into an educational leadership role, it took me a long time to say that out loud. And I think, you know, maybe it's a thing that we do here in the South, but it seems to me like women are more reluctant to announce big goals, and that we feel like we're trying to maybe be all that if we say we want to be the boss. And so I had a lot of people who encouraged me to go into a leadership role, and they saw potential in me. And so there was never that doubt that there might be some talent or strength there, but I was so reluctant to do it. And so I finally got a coworker to agree to go to school with me. And as we were talking about it, we found out we had to have a letter of reference from our principal, because we were teachers going to go to school to be principals. And so we went to see the principal, and he gave us some really neat advice. And it really kind of set this whole chain of motion, train in action. I don't know where I'm going with that, Ian, but anyway, he said, this is a small community. And he said, in this community, I'm going to be very blunt with you, because I love you and I care about you. I want to make sure that you really do something with what you're planning on doing. And he said, there are not a lot of opportunities in this community for leaders in general, but also for female leaders.
Wow.
And I was really kind of blown away that he said that. And he said, I say it because over my years, and I think at that point, he had been an administrator in the school system 40 years in different districts, but he had 40 years of leadership under his belt. And he said, it makes my heart ache to see how many women like you invest in themselves and go to school, put the time in, do a great job, they have all of the skills in the package. And when they're done, they come back to work and they sit there and they wait for somebody to select them to be the leader. And it just never happens. And they just retire, whether they retire with those degrees. And he said, so I'm not going to sign this letter, first of all, unless you tell me for sure that you're really going to do something with it. You know, that you're really just going to go for it. And he said, that may mean getting in a car and going somewhere else. So I want you to wrap your mind around it right now. He said, there are only a few leadership positions in this district. And when you look around at us, we're not leaving right now. And if we did leave in this community, a lot of times women are second choice as leadership roles. And so I just wondered about that. You know, I just sort of put it in my pocket as a person I trusted, a person that loved me and cared about me and had mentored me, that he would say something so honest and so truthful and yet so wrong. You know, it was just so wrong in so many ways, that because I was a woman, I stood like a double whammy there, not only being in a community with few opportunities, but being a woman in a community with few opportunities. And nobody had ever said that to me before so bluntly.
Yeah, you know, I think that story for me resonates so deeply as a former teacher, that I saw that. I worried about that for myself. And I think you're right that we have this reticence as women. And I do wonder this, you know, as a fellow Texan, I wonder, is this just something that we're taught, this ladylike thing in the South, or is this prevalent everywhere? And I don't know the answer to that. And I'll be curious to know if we have people joining us from more northern states, if they also feel this, but that it's almost unbecoming to announce your ambitions, to say, you know what, I'm going to go get my master's degree because I want to be the principal of this school. And then later I want to be the superintendent of this district. Like, I can't remember any time in my decade of teaching that I heard any woman ever so bluntly, you know, announce their ambitions that way. And how lucky you were that you had an ally to kind of to shake you out of that habit.
Yeah, he even said, your first job is worth 100 miles. And I said, what does that mean? And he said, put a dot on our little community and then make a circle around it 100 miles wide. And he said, your first opportunity is the hardest one to get. And he said, so if you're willing to drive 100 miles for the first opportunity, or maybe you'll have to move, you know, you may have to relocate. But if you're willing to do that, you can eventually come back to this area and be what you want to be. But it's all based on having the experience. And he said, you won't get it here, I'm afraid. It's just unlikely to happen. So you have to decide, are you willing to sit still in a community where you love and never progress in any role? Or do you want to progress in a role and maybe at the expense of leaving the community? So it was a hard choice, you know?
Yeah, I know. I love that, Cindy, because I think one of the tips that we can even take away from this story is that, you know, we as women, we take on these, like, we decide we're going to be trailblazing and go get our master's degree or go get whatever education is necessary and get that. And that seems to us like maybe the biggest and the only step. But what he was saying is you actually physically have to also take a step.
Yes.
You have to get out of your space. And I just saw in the chat that they said that this idea is prevalent even in Canada too.
Oh, okay.
And so it's all of, I think then it's a universal thing that all women leaders in education are feeling. And so I love that. So then what did you do with that, Cindy? I mean, you certainly went on and
so what I see, even as a professor, is women typically do very well in university settings. So I did well in college. You know, my friend that went with me, we did fine. We did great in our coursework. And so at some point we had to choose sort of a path to study. And I thought, well, you know, I'd kind of like to understand this glass ceiling thing because it never mattered to me before. But now, is it true? Like, is this really a real thing that in the 21st century, women still have sort of a limit on us? Yeah. And I just couldn't grasp it because education is a very kind field. And so maybe perhaps more so than the business world, we're really surrounded by, you know, the whole point is to help other people. And so it was hard for me to grasp, having been in a place where people are always trying to grow others, that maybe I couldn't grow because I was a woman. Like I just couldn't imagine that. And so I read this study that really made an impact on me. And I'm so sorry, I don't know who wrote it. It was probably about 2013 that it was authored, so I maybe could find it. But it was an interview series with school board members. And they were asking school board members, why did they pick male superintendents instead of female superintendents? And they said, and the school board members are an interesting group to interview because they have nothing to lose. I mean, they're just tell you what they think. And it's not personal to them. They're not in the school system. They're just telling you why they chose one employee over another because they hired the superintendent. Right. So it was a national study. So they weren't just Texas people. I remember in particular, some were from maybe like the Chicago area. And I think there were some maybe from New York. And what they said was, we see women doing this weird thing in interviews. We get them, like we can see the credentials are good and we'll bring in men and women to interview because we want diverse applicant pools. But when the women come to the table, they're a different sort of honest than men. And so what the men do in the interviews is they'll say, for example, the school is struggling. You know, we have this terrible financial problem. Our test scores are rotten. You know, we're worried we're going to get closed down. Do you think you can fix this? And the man will say, sure, I can. No problem. I got this. You're going to be in great shape by the time, you know, I'm 2 years into the job. Just give me a couple of years. We'll get this ship turned around. And they go on. And then with the women candidates, they would say, you know, I think with time and with the proper team in place, if we all work together, you know, we could, it'll be a challenge to do that. But I believe, you know, you have to understand, like, and they would add all these qualifiers and they were thinking out loud in front of the interview committee. And so what the interview committee would say, the people who were interviewed for the article said, we felt great confidence inspired by the men because they would just come right out and say, of course I can do that. And with the women, they would think out loud in front of us. Like the men obviously had the same kinds of challenges that the women faced and that they would have gaps in their own knowledge base. But the women would say, I have this gap in my knowledge base, and so I'm going to need help to do this. And so the outcomes could be the same, but the women didn't get the job because they didn't inspire confidence in the committee that was hiring them. So that really was profoundly impactful for me to think that something as small as just saying, of course I can do it. And so I went home and I told my husband about it. He goes, oh, that's like this Teddy Roosevelt quote. I was like, what quote? He's like, first, get the job and then go about finding out how to do it. And so that became sort of my mantra, like just be like, think like a man. Go ahead and accept the job and say, I can do it. And then find out how to do it as you go. That sort of fake it as fake it until you make it sort of thing. Really, it worked for me. I took some jobs that maybe other people wouldn't have taken.
Yeah.
And it was very effective to just jump in and just do the work and to surround myself with people that were talented in maybe ways that I wasn't. And to know that my strength was in leading this team, it was extremely effective.
I love that. I think that that's such really good practical advice, is like, don't worry about, you just know that you can. Just inspire that confidence. And I think that, the study that you're describing is talking about it in an interview setting, but I think even, from your wherever you are in your career right now, when people come to you with project ideas or new initiatives, and say, do you think you can do this? Inspiring that confidence at every turn, whether it's for a new opportunity or a new initiative, is to say, yeah, I can do it. And I have this Teddy Roosevelt quote right here.
Okay, so what does it really say?
Yeah, it says, whenever you are asked if you could do a job, tell them, certainly I can. Then get busy and find out how to do it.
That's right.
I love it.
Powerful. Isn't that so cool?
It is. It's so great. My mom, she used to say this little poem to us when we were growing up. And it says, if you think you are beaten, you are. If you think dare not, you don't. If you'd like to win but think you can't, it's almost a cinch you won't. Life's battles don't always go to the stronger or faster man. They go to the one who believes in himself and always thinks I can.
That's right.
And so it's just the same kind of sentiment. If you just always say yes or always say, I think I can do that. You're right. We as women tend to qualify things. And so I'm curious to know, do you think our reticence to do that in an interview setting as women leaders is because we don't want to come across as unbecoming or boastful, like we mentioned before, like where you started, that we don't do that as women. We don't say, these are my ambitions and this is the things I know that I can do. Do you think that that's what stops us from doing that?
Yes, I think that as a group, we sort of minimize that characteristic in ourselves with other women, that when a lady says things like that, like my mother, for example, told somebody the other day that I was a bossy little girl, and if she had been talking about my brother, she wouldn't have ever said, how many people have you ever heard say he's a bossy little boy?
Zero.
None. There are no bossy little boys. There are leaders. No. He's such a little leader. And so the fact that my mother said that, it didn't hurt my feelings because
of course
it's my mom.
Yeah.
But the fact that is what we assign to little girls, it never really leaves. Like, she's such a bossy person.
Yeah.
You've never heard anybody say that a man was such a bossy man.
No.
He's
right.
a natural born leader.
Yeah. I'm hopeful that like this next generation, we're really changing that vernacular. I'm cognizant of it as a mother of two girls. Even when I hear them say, oh, she's bossy, I say, good for her. Yeah. I bet she is. Like, just even if I can't get them to stop saying the word, if I can change the connotation of the word, yeah, I bet she'll be a boss one day. That's right. She's going to be a boss one day, Right. And so I think that's great. I'm curious, this is the next thing I want to ask you about, really, because we realize that women leaders, especially in education, generally take this approach professionally. What tips and tricks do you have so that they can begin to create a new future for themselves? And you mentioned the second study, so I also want you to touch on that too, if you could, Cindy.
Sure. So I read a study put out by the American, AASA, American Association of Superintendents. I don't know, maybe there's another America in there. I don't know what the other A is. they're the big national organization for superintendents. And so they did a study where they surveyed all of their members and they asked, how many were men, how many were women, just a basic, gender gap study. And then sort of their pipeline, because I'm a big believer in what the pipeline says to us about preparing ourselves for leadership roles. So they said that the gap is closing a little bit, but here are the statistics. So I'm going to use ballpark numbers. There's actual real numbers. You can Google them, but for our ballpark numbers will work. So the population of female teachers in the field of education is around 70 to 75%. So you can think somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 of every teaching employee in a school district is female. The leadership, the superintendent, is flipped. And so even though only 25% of the pipeline pool is male, okay, they represent 75 to 80% of the superintendent pool.
Wow.
So just think, first of all, just the salary gap. So maybe like right now in Texas, a starting teacher makes $50,000. So if you're working somewhere else, we're always hiring. Come down, we'll pay $50,000. Okay. We have big schools, we're growing fast. But a superintendent in Texas, a low paid superintendent would make it a minimum of $100,000. And they would typically make $225,000, $350,000 a year. So you think about the pay gap there between the entry level and the top. And there's only one superintendent in the district. So, granted, that's the CEO. So if you think about the fact that only now we moved from 12.5% to 13% 10 years ago, we're up to 20 to 25% in I think the data was 2016, 2017 school year. Okay. But what they said was it was interesting to see what the pipeline showed about who moved through the ranks of leadership, because it started immediately with the lowest level. So high schools tend to be more populated with male teachers. Male teachers typically don't teach elementary, and they sometimes teach middle school, but they're more likely to teach high school.
Right.
More superintendents came through the pipeline from high school ranks than elementary and middle school. And they said the reason they think is because it begins with a position called department chair. And there is no department chair at elementary or middle school. Okay? Because the department chair is a function of the administration on the campus. So most of the people who had gone through the pipeline had started as their first leadership role, moving from a teacher to being the head teacher, which is the department chair. The department chair has budgeting decisions, and they have some staffing input. So they'll say, well, this teacher should teach the freshmen, this one should teach the advanced class. Okay. That translates to a school board hiring you eventually because you have financial knowledge. They said they were more comfortable hiring a leader who they viewed as a strong financial leader first, an instructional leader second, and they only hired an instructional leader first if the school was failing. Okay, so females were viewed more as instructional leaders, males were viewed as financial leaders. Isn't that interesting?
That's fascinating.
It's really insulting to both groups.
Absolutely.
It's insulting to a male too, that he would be viewed less as an instructional leader, and it's insulting to a female that she would be viewed less as a financial leader.
Absolutely.
But because school boards are they're locally elected people, at least in Texas they are. They may be different in some of the other states, but I believe they're similar.
I think that's the same.
School boards are locally elected citizens, and they typically come from a business background. They're on the school board for a purpose, and they're usually high profile in the community because they're either like one of the founding fathers of the community, one of the names that or else they're maybe the local doctor, dentist, lawyer, banker. And so when they look to hire a CEO, they're looking for a CEO in the business sense. They want somebody that will make them financially stable, fiscally, good. And they don't see the teachers that way. They see the financial leaders that way who have been in administrative roles. So the pipeline goes from department chair to assistant principal to principal of the high school to central office to superintendent.
Right.
So it's much more difficult for an elementary person or a middle school person to get there. So the second factor was, and this is not a shock, but it makes a lot of sense when you think about it, coaching. So almost every superintendent had been a coach, male and female.
Right.
And the coach is not because we valued sports necessarily, although, I get that. There's a great physical connection. Research shows when you work out with a person, you're forever bonded with them. Even if your views are different. There's something like the pheromones. When you go walking together, you run together. If you want to stay with your spouse longer, exercise with them. That's what research says. Go work out. And so when people do sports together, they've gone outside the school setting. They've traveled on buses. They've gone, to a certain place together. And they form these outside of the classroom relationships with adults that classroom teachers don't get. Okay. And then the other thing is coaches have a budget.
Yeah.
They supervise people. They make decisions. And they said that in a typical high school, there are 6 boys sports and 6 girls sports, which I'm not an athlete, didn't really know that. There's 6 boys sports and 6 girls sports. And we tend to call the leader of those the head coach. So there's your title for your resume. I'm not just a teacher. I was the head girls softball coach. Okay. I had a budget. I had a network. I got to get outside of school. I know people from other communities. People know my character from the way I behaved on the field.
Right.
Okay. So even though it's easy for us to sort of poo-poo the sports thing, it's huge when you think about the network opportunities for them.
And so is that one of your tips and tricks, Cindy? Is that what you would say? Is that like, you know, as women, we should try to seek out opportunities to kind of go up that same track?
Yes,
or
network. So what I did in an elementary setting, I started off 14 years in elementary. I was very frustrated because I began to sense that because I taught first and second grade, which is not a tested grade, it's a big deal, that I was less respected, and that when I had stellar results, that they were not acknowledged. So I asked to move to a grade that was tested. And because I was so very good at first and second, really, it was a great passion of mine. They wouldn't let me change grade levels.
Wow.
So, well, I mean, you think about how hard is it to find an amazing first grade teacher. And if you don't have a great first grade year, then the whole thing is messed up. You know, the child struggles, the relationship is messed up with the parent and the home. And so I understand that from a leadership perspective, but I really felt stifled. So eventually I went to middle school. I changed communities, went to the community where my students, where I lived and where my students, my own children attended school. And I taught middle school for 2 years. Then I moved up to high school, taught high school for 1 year, and instantly all these doors opened.
Interesting.
Isn't that weird? Because I had finished my
not surprising.
But the master's, when I got my first big break, the committee that hired me for a district level position, which, I mean, honestly, talk about fake it till you make it. I went from zero classroom budget, none, to $625,000 budget that I had to administer. And I had no teachers that I supervised, and all of a sudden I supervised 225 teachers. I had no programs that I administered, and all of a sudden I'm administering programs with 6,000 students.
And do you think that, Cindy, was because when you showed up to that interview, you were confident? You elicited that confidence.
And there's no way I was qualified for that job. Really and truly. I mean, because I love it. No rookie ever is. You're never qualified.
No rookie ever is. Yeah.
You're going to be qualified for a job. So what I did to establish my credibility was I had consistently from day one volunteered for the grunt work at school. You know, it just never bothered me to do the extra work. I always felt like somebody had to do it. Somebody with integrity should do it. It should be me. And so I had served on every committee ever known to man. You know, there's just always somebody, even when I had small children, we worked it out where I could, you know, I went to training, I went to conferences, and I began to be asked to present at conferences because the network I was in. You know, I joined a collaborative for improving science instruction. And so then I was on a roadshow team. You know, the roadshow team took me to a state conference. It was my first time to present at a state conference.
Right.
And I got invited to teach at Baylor, and Baylor had a team that went and did a roadshow type thing. And so I had to create my own opportunities outside the classroom. It's not going to happen if you stay in your office or in your cubicle or in your classroom. It's that network.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So now I want to stop. So I want to pause so we can bring everybody into this conversation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have Amelia post the link to the exchange. I'm going to share this screen with you here. All you have to do, guys, is take out your mobile device. You can either click on the link that Amelia has put in the chat, or you can take your mobile device out, open your camera. A little pop down will come out, click on that, go straight through into the exchange. We're going to be asking the question, what thoughts or questions do you have for Cindy? The third way that you can join is go to thoughtexchange.com/join and enter this 9-digit code that you see here on your screen. Once you get in there, all you're going to need to do is agree to the terms of use. You don't have to sign up with your email if you don't want to. And then you just go in there and you share your thoughts and questions that you have for Cindy. Once you do that, once you've hit the share step, you'll move into the star step where we start to rate the thoughts and questions of others so that we can get the prioritized list. And then we'll spend the last part of this interview going through that list of thoughts and questions with Cindy. In order for you to participate, I'm going to need to be quiet. So I'm going to do that and give you just a few minutes to get in there and share your thoughts and questions. Okay, Cindy, are you ready to jump in?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Some great questions in here. Can you please share some resources about how we can build confidence at work?
Okay, so I encourage you to read professionally. That's one thing I do is I read widely. A great person to start with is John Maxwell. He's a really good author you can read. And he's got a lot of workbook type books where you can work through, assess your own skills, and you can see where there's an area where you could grow. So I do think that helps with confidence. And I also think it's important for you to get out of your comfort zone and go do something different, you know. And if you've been in the same job for a long time, you might switch it up. Even if you don't change campuses or work settings, just see if there's some way you can take on a different type of duty or maybe work with a different team. So just switch it up just a little bit so that you're fresh. It keeps you on your toes when you're doing new things. Change is good. It's hard, but it's really good. Yeah.
I think you're right. I think that that's a good idea. Like taking on something, getting out of your comfort zone, you may not feel the confidence from that immediately, right? Because anytime you start to do the new curve of learning, you go, you have the dip where you go, oh, I'm not good at this. And then all of a sudden though, when you overcome that, your burst of confidence is usually much greater, exponentially greater than the dip that you felt previously.
Yeah, that's what I tell all of our principal interns. I don't want to see you log hours and things you're already good at. What good is that? Why are you going to college? You know, why would you go back and learn more about what you already are really good at? Let's work on things that you haven't explored before. Try something way outside your comfort zone, really different.
That is such a quotable quote that I'm writing down, Cindy. Don't log hours in things that you're already good at.
That's right.
I think that's a good mantra. Whenever you're feeling that discomfort of taking on something new, you're going, that's okay. I'm not logging hours in something I already know how to do. I'm already good at. So that's great.
You might go, hi, what was I thinking? But you'll get through it. You'll get.
That's good. Okay. I love those resources. John Maxwell, workbook, skills assessments, and then of course, getting out of your comfort zone, even if you stay in your same role, seeking out opportunities outside of that role so that you can continue to build your confidence. Great. Do you believe, I think this is a great question. I'm so excited to hear your answer to this. Do you believe that women need more education credentials to move up the ladder?
I think they maybe need a deeper network. Does that make sense? I think your credentials are important. You need to have equal credentials. And one thing I did when I pursued the doctorate, I really thought about it a long time because it's expensive and it's a big commitment on your time, you know. And I had not a baby family, but I had a middle school, high school family. You know, so I definitely had kids at home the entire time I was working on it. And so I went around and asked people that I respected, what did they think about the importance of the doctorate? Is it just something that you're going to hang on the wall, or is it something that open doors? And so the response that I got was, the bachelor's qualifies you to do the work. The master's qualifies you to supervise the work. The doctorate qualifies you to give an opinion on the supervision of the work.
Oh, so I love that.
You're investing in yourself. So think about how long can you physically as a human, how long can your body do the work? And then how much longer can you extend your work life if you're supervising the work? And sometimes that shortens your work life. It depends on how the supervisor. But then you can infinitely give your opinion. So with a doctorate degree, you're qualified to give your opinion as long as you're not suffering dementia. I mean, if you're mentally stable, your opinion is. And so I really see that in higher ed. That's interesting. It's the first time I've worked with a community of employees that are significantly older citizens, and they're making a good living. They're making a great contribution to the world. And so it's been really interesting joining the higher ed ranks, but I see it also in school leadership. So, you know, the answer to the question, do you need more credentials to move up the ladder? I don't think you need more, but you definitely will suffer if you have less. And that's the other question I asked about superintendency, because that was something I had thought about pursuing, and I just stopped just short of that. I did upper level central office, and then I moved to higher ed. But with the superintendency, the thought is it depends on the size of the community and what the community expects. And so in Texas, the schools are divided by football classifications, and it's a shock. But we have the A's, you know, there's like 1A is a really tiny school and 6A is the biggest school. And so if you wanted to lead in a, like say a 3A or a larger school, it's now an expectation that all applicants would have a doctorate, whether that's written or implied. You won't be competitive if you don't have a doctorate from those mid-size and up schools. With the smaller schools, they sometimes will look more at the individual candidates, and they may get fewer doctoral applicants, but the doctoral pool is increasing. So
No, that's great. I think you're right, though. I love that little tidbit, though, that you can have equal credentials, but women just need a deeper network. And I think that that just speaks to the strength that we have when we really work together to continue to empower one another and bring one another up and help one another find new opportunities out there. Your tribe, I think, is vitally important as you move up the ranks.
Well, I also think it's very important to make this point that don't limit your network to women.
Of course.
I mean,
That's
like, think about the great advice I got from the male mentor I had. You know, if I had limited my network to women, it might have been a very different message. You know, and so my tribe is full of men and women. You know, there are some incredible people who have mentored me and who, you know, I stand on the shoulders of giants kind of thing. And so I feel the same. I mentor people all the time, and I don't look at, you know, what they look like. You know, it doesn't matter to me if they're men or women. But I am sensitive to the challenges that women face because I've seen them, you know, seen them firsthand.
No, I think you're absolutely right. One of our last virtual event, I will virtual event speakers, she talked about, you know, of course, the importance of the network with your women, but also the importance of the network with your power, what she called her power allies. And that was like, you know, gender blind. It didn't matter what their gender was, but they were just allies for her in her corner and her network. And that's, I think, who we should be leaning on. So that's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay. Do you think it's important to have a male ally, or can we do this on our own? I think you kind of just touched on this. We talked about making sure your network is far and wide with both men and women. Anyone who's on your side is probably a good idea.
Right. But I do think it's critical not to use people. You know, like, don't befriend a person just because they're going to help you get that next job. That's really, it should be a two-way relationship. Like, you should network for the sake of increasing your knowledge base and knowing more about the world around you and making connections and helping other people. It's two-way. So you don't want to ever be viewed as a person who just latches on. You know, I think there's that tendency in education and in a lot of other roles too, where we want to make certain visual sacrifices that people can see that maybe would increase our numbers in the game. And so an example I have, you know, where I just said no, is I was in a setting for a period of time where I would not have wanted my own children to attend school. It was a turnaround situation, and I was working really diligently to make a difference there, but it wasn't a setting that I felt comfortable putting my own children through. You know, I was trying to rescue children from that setting, not bring my own children into that setting. And so as a mom, I had that dilemma because it would have been beneficial professionally for me to bring my own children into that setting with me. But you have to have some limits. You have to have some limits. You have to say, this is my work and this is what I do, but I'm not going to make sacrifices on my values and my morals and, you know, just to promote. It's not worth it to promote. There was another time where in my husband's work, it would have been beneficial for us to go to a certain church. That's very Southern. You know, I live in the Bible Belt.
It is. I know.
And, you know, you just gotta love it. And we did go to church, but we'd always gone to this church we've always gone to. And so, you know, we had to weigh, would you change, like, would you basically sell God? You know, are you going to kind of like put political pressure to change something that is so deeply personal? No. No. Yeah. And so I think there's a lot of cautions with building a network. Don't sell out who you are because of, you know, the opportunities of a network.
I think that's great. That's great advice, Cindy. Yeah. At the end of the day, all you have left is your integrity.
That's right.
And so make sure you hold tight to that. Okay. This is the last one I want to end with, because I think we touched on do women need higher credentials? We touched on that one. And then this last question, how do you present with confidence when you aren't sure how to do that?
Oh, well, one thing is to always have humor, you know, just to be good humor. Like, we had to change the day of this conference, you know, and
we did. And
that's okay, just to be flexible. And I think for a woman, it's important to turn off that little voice recorder in your head so you don't play it back later. I think that we're bad about that as a teacher, that we have this little voice recorder and we record ourselves talking and we record the people around us talking. And then later in the quiet times, we push play and we listen to it the way we think we heard it play. And maybe we listen to it over and over again. And I just call that bury the bone. You know, just don't invest yourself in that. Don't be a person that overthinks things and to me, that gives me confidence because yes, I will learn lessons when I present or when I lead or when I do things that I haven't done before. And I want to learn from those and I want to do better next time. But I want to take them away as objective points of improvement, sort of like constructive criticism from a friend.
Yeah.
So don't be your own worst enemy on those things.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, Brene Brown mentions, you know, we have this tendency to, like, what she calls cozy up with criticism.
Yes.
Like if someone gives us positive reinforcement, we'll say, oh, thank you. And we'll just let it come through us and go away. But we'll cozy up with something critical that somebody said with us and we play it for ourselves over and over in that same way. I like that. Bury the bone though.
Yeah.
Bury that bone.
And one other thing too is when I worked recently for a consulting company that was all men. Like there were a few ladies, but none of us were in the same home office. And so I worked daily for the first time ever with only men. And one thing they kept telling me was, don't ever apologize.
Yeah.
It really didn't set well with me because I'm an apologizer. You know, it's just part of who I am. And they said it's unprofessional. It's bad for our business when you apologize. And so I actually Googled it. You know, what do you do instead of apologizing? And so I've changed one little phrase and it's made all the difference. Now I say, thank you for. So if I'm late, I say, thank you for waiting. I don't offer an excuse for why I was late. If I dropped a ball, I say, thank you for your patience. I don't say, I'm sorry I dropped the ball. And it's not that my sentiment has changed. I am sorry that I dropped the ball. I am sorry that I'm late. But what it does is it cuts the excuses out. And it makes you look more leader-like and less excusey. It's excusey.
Yeah. No, I think we can make it a word, Cindy. I love it.
Yeah.
No, this is great. I think that that's a really great tip. I'm so glad we're able to end there. We're right at 45 hours. So I just want to thank you again, Cindy, for this lovely conversation. I think it's been beneficial for all of our panelists. All of our attendees. You've been the greatest speaker and co-host with me. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This was a great honor. Thank you for including me.
Yeah, of course. Like I mentioned at the beginning, guys, if you want to join our team member Kumar, Amelia has posted that link. As a reminder, we will send out the replay from this virtual event along with this report afterwards in case you want to send it on to any of your colleagues or those women in your network or any other power allies that you think would benefit from seeing this particular one. Thanks so much, guys. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.
Bye, Cindy.